Okay, jag tror att, I believe that most of you are here. Or are we waiting for someone? No. So, thank you everybody. Thank you for staying here all day. Thank you for, and also thank you for participating overseas, more or less. And pity you couldn't come. It's a very good place to be here in Visby. And thank you very much for the panel and all the speakers, of course. And thank you very much, the organizers, to let me finish this seminar or workshop and also try to make a summary, because it's been a very intensive day with many new and many interesting ideas that we just started to talk about and could be, of course, more deeply discussed here. And so I think that we can promise that we will come back to that. But anyway, we talked about heritage, we talked about cultural heritage, we talked about sustainability during the day. And I think that we can say that we started more or less to have, as far as I understood, a rather common understanding of the concept of cultural heritage. And you say that it is constant changing in a changing world, and it also interpretation is changing, and also how to use it, if I say so, and is changing. And but at the same time, it's not. It cannot be regarded as a renewable community. So that means that we also have to have an idea how we can preserve it. If we find it valuable, how can we preserve it? And that also leads us to the question why we preserve something and why we conserve something, but also which many of the speakers come back to, for whom, and maybe not so much about how. It was another kind of discussion here that I think was very interesting to follow. But this also led to, if you understand that heritage is in change, that means also that what we are doing more or less as a professionals is also to improve the management of this change. And listen to you, it's not just about the conservation of the tangible, it's also more focused on the intangible. And how can we understand that? And you can say that I think that all of you spoke very much about the people, and that heritage is people-oriented. And one more time, you'll have left the stone back home and also the monuments, but it's more and more, I think, for the whole heritage community or sector or whatever you call it, that is more not just focused on the people, but also the people's understanding of the heritage. So many of you come back to this question, for whom? And also you also talked about the shared heritage. And that also opened up interesting discussions. You also mentioned that these sometimes heritage you can find it in the museums, or artifacts at least, you can find in the museums come from all over the world, more or less. And but it's not just something happened in the past, it's also happened today, more or less, when we are speaking here. Another thing that comes with this is that you have to understand preservation of heritage and heritage itself more from a bottom-up perspective. So it's not just a big organization, global, national, regional, local organization that can play this role. It has to be a more bottom-up perspective. And some of you also spoke about the increased cooperation and collaboration with the local people. And and people living in the cities, for instance. So that means also that conservation has to be more open-minded and also let the local people into these decision-making processes. And in the end, how can we develop this or strengthening this participatory approach or approaches? And I think that is important for us as a university. How can we understand this new mechanism, and how can we take part of this? And speaking about the university, some mention it. University has a specific role here when it comes to heritage and sustainability. And that also leads us to another, which I understood as a common understanding from you, was that heritage, of course, has an interdisciplinary approach. And that means that we also have to reflect on many values that it represents. And with this, also to more indicators to understand these values. So if heritage is changing, we also need more systematic, dynamic approaches and interaction between this tangible or material dimension and human side or the intangible dimension. And this is also something we need to understand also when we speak about the sustainability or energy perspective or the climate change. So it is not just what we talked about here. We have examples from the technological approaches, but it's also a socioeconomic dimension that needs to be more developed and understood. So, of course, today there are many researchers active in this field, and we can see all the reports and papers produced everywhere. I don't think that anyone has the time to read them, but at least we can read some of them. But it is so many things happening, and as you said, you just come from Gothenburg for a similar discussion, so this is something that is really happening. And I think it's very interesting to see this, but it also say that it is a kind of change going on at the moment, and I think that we are just in the beginning of this change within the heritage sector. It's a change of the mindset that is, of course, going from this strictly tangible approach to a more, as you say, people-oriented, but also to see how we can understand it from within the sustainability approach and the sustainable development. And today we have this very clear objective, which we can call the UN SDGs, the clear objective. But I think it's important to remember that this development of sustainable development goals, let's say that they have a history of 50 years. I think it was 1972 that the national governments met in Stockholm for the very first discussion. And at the same time, they also met in Paris, maybe. I don't know where it was, but they met and decided upon the World Heritage Convention in UNESCO. And for me, and I think for you, and for many of our colleagues, it has been clear that conservation of cultural heritage is a part of the sustainable development movement. And I mean, it is about taking care of existing resources. So, but I think that we need to remember, it's just so recently that we were acknowledged also by the rest of the society. For the very first time, heritage is mentioned, as it was said here, for the very first time in the UN SDGs. And that means that it's some kind of struggling that is going on. And of course, nobody is satisfied that we just mentioned in one of the targets. and we only have this indicator that we more or less can laugh at. But we need to develop more indicators. We need to understand the impact of heritage in a much more multi-dimensional approach, understanding. And I think it was very interesting to listen to when we talked about this optimistic bias. And I can agree, but I can also disagree with this, because in my opinion, this economic or socioeconomic part is not mentioned so much, what I can see, at least in Swedish reports or evaluation of projects. Not in that way. Of course, they are mentioned, and we need to be much more precise. But also, I think it's important that we need to be better to communicate what we are doing with the rest of the society. We are speaking about the local people, many of you, but we also have to be better to speak to the other stakeholders, and also at the policy level. And that means that we need to find a way to communicate this, and also a way to negotiate about this. And so far, I think that monetary terms or values are at least the most usual one to discuss this. So even if we, let's say, within the sector or within the heritage community needs to understand and discuss these values, it's not for sure that we can use the same thing when we negotiate with others. For instance, when we apply for a research fund, or when we are trying to preserve a building, or when we try to be more important than within SDGs, and especially when we go for the next phase of that, which is the Agenda 2045, which already started. And I hope that heritage can have a much bigger role there. But we need to be able to discuss and present what we are doing in this way. So I'm in the end with this day. I think that you agree with me if I say that it's been very interesting to listen to all these different aspects of heritage relation to sustainability. And we can almost say that we have discussed this from the 3-pillar approach today. And I believe that we can definitely find some ways and some opportunities to increase or establish a very good relation here together with you, and also to see if we can find very interesting research projects for the future. So thank you very much, and looking forward to see you soon again.